How do you write some historical fiction about one of the most horrific events in American history and you actually try to make it scarier? Well, that's a tough dinner order to fill. Too soon? Hey, what's up, bookworms? I hope you're hungry, because today we are talking about the most recent book on the Fright Fest schedule, and that is 2018's The Hunger by Alma Katsu. This is an author that I feel like has kind of exploded onto the horror scene ever since Stephen King tweeted that this was just very, very deeply disturbing of a book. And since then, I feel like Miss Katsu has actually carved out a bit of a niche amongst the community as someone who is going to tackle historical horror fiction, like she has most recently she released one was about the haunting and events that led up to the sinking of the Titanic, and obviously this one is tackling the Donner Party, one of the darkest moments in American history. So it's a really neat idea that I think that she's kind of decided to try to corner here, but anytime you've got anything that deals with the Donner Party, this is a subject that I have been very, very intrigued with ever since we learned about it way back in the days of playing Oregon Trail in junior high and leading up to learning about the actual historical events of the Donner Party. If you don't know, if you're not from the States, or if you just didn't pay attention in history class, the Donner Party was part of westward expansion in America. Go west, young man, as they used to say. And there is a very famous group, the Donner, now known as the Donner Party, that actually got off track. They didn't make it in time before winter hit. They got stuck in the mountains of Nevada, and they had to try to survive the winter. And then when they ran out of food, they had to resort to cannibalism to survive. So yes, it is a story that I feel like has just wowed people for decades, and they just become like obsessed with it. Just like, what in the world do these people have to go through to get to this point? So I feel like it's a topic that has been primed just to be ready for this book. So that gets us into what is it about here. Now, if you know the history of the Donner Party, you kind of get an idea, but this kind of expands on that by dealing with the idea that Tamsin Donner must be a witch. That is the only way to explain the series of misfortunes that have plagued the wagon train known as the Donner Party. Depleted rations, bitter quarrels, and a mysterious death of a little boy have driven the pioneers to the brink of madness. They cannot escape the feeling that someone or something is stalking them. Whether it is a curse from the beautiful Tamsin, the choice to follow a disastrous experimental route west, or just the plain bad luck, the 90 men and women and children of the Donner Party are at the brink of one of the deadliest and most disastrous Western adventures in American history. But while the ill-fated group struggles to survive in the treacherous mountain conditions, searing heat that turns the sand into bubbling stew, snows that freeze the oxen where they stand, evil begins to grow around them and within them. As members of the party begin to disappear, they must ask themselves, what if there is something waiting in those mountains? Something disturbing and diseased and maybe very hungry. Now, that might be a little bit overly dramatic, but hey, that's what sales pitches are for these books, right? But let's do our usual format here. Let's get into what makes it good or bad. Now, good, obviously, like I said, this is a very dark moment in American history. It is something that has just fascinated and horrified students and historians for a generation plus. So it's something that we cannot stop trying to learn more and more about. And we feel like every time we've got nailed down what it was, some kind of new idea is presented. So when you have a topic like this, obviously this is just the perfect kind of story to be made into a little bit of a supernatural twist to it, like she's trying to do here. So I feel like it really is the perfect content to kind of tackle this new subgenre of historical horror fiction, which I didn't even know was a thing until this happened. But the story, I think, it's really decently paced. There's never really a drag. There are some structure issues I'll talk about in a minute, but I really never feel like her writing is slow or anything like that. It's very action-oriented. Even in some of the character study moments, you still never feel like there's a moment without someone either plotting or someone who might be evil or someone who might just, let's say they don't have the best of intentions. So you never really get bogged down with, wow, this is boring, I'm not relating with these characters at all. So I think that you are actually able to get invested in some of the characters. Some are more likable than others. Obviously, I feel like some are set up to be villains like right away. And again, that's because we're basing this off history. But I mean, I feel like it really is just kind of a slow descent into hell. And I mean, that's, all the warning signs were there for the Donner Party. So I feel like in that regard, Katsu did her homework. She really did break down the history of this. She followed the journals from the people that were on the actual expedition, and she followed that timeline day by day to the events leading, especially when you get up to the Salt Plains in Utah. That's where it really, really went south for these people. So I feel like she does a good job of pacing. It isn't just like immediately, oh God, we're going to die. I mean, it really does have that sense of foreboding. And even if you don't know the history, you kind of get that, kind of comes through. So yeah, she did her homework really, really well. And I think she really does follow that timeline to a T. She could not have done that better. I also think that she does a nice twist. There are a lot of unexplained, or let's just say unclear, deaths along the way before that tragic event after Forlorn Hope. It has those things where there's some people who got into feuds. There's people who got into knife fights. There's people who shot people. It's things that you could only go from second, third, fourth hand accounts of what actually happened because so few people survived this expedition. And the last thing they're thinking about probably after the recovery is, oh yeah, before we got to the mountains, right? Obviously, that's probably going to be one of those things that they just don't even think about anymore. But again, she does take some of those events and she gives her own spin on why they happen. And I thought that was a clever idea. However, that leads me to the bad. And sadly, there is a lot of bad in this book. The biggest one is I feel like the true story of the Donner Party is already horrific enough. And what she does is not nearly as scary as what actually happened. That's the biggest problem here. I feel like, obviously, cannibalism is the most horrifying part of this story. I mean, that is why it has reached just levels of pop culture that everyone knows about this just about by now, even if they weren't big history nerds like I was in high school. But again, the cannibalism part of that story was a last resort, okay? These people were eating shoe leather, shoelaces, they were eating the canopy from their tents before they even considered thinking about eating the people who had not made it, or even worse, killing someone to eat them to survive, or someone, sacrificing themselves so others could live. Or they used to say in Forlorn Hope, the journal said, one shall die so others may live, people making a sacrifice and things like that. So I think kind of putting her spin on that, it's like some of the things I really liked, some of the others not so much. I don't want to spoil what the actual big twist is because I just don't want to do that. I don't want to spoil that for you. But the supernatural elements, I feel like they're uninspired and very unnecessary. Truly, like I said, I feel like this probably would have been done better if it was just a dramatic retelling of what actually happened up there. Because when I use my fear rating for this, I would give it a 4. But the thing is this is a story where it should have been a 10 on that scale, because this is truly horrific stuff. It is absolutely terrifying. What is worse than freezing to death, having to resort to eating someone you knew? What is worse than having to kill someone you know to eat them to survive? And again, just living through this whole horrific event. So it's a story that's very scary on its own right. When you try to add in things, the supernatural twist, and again, some of them I really liked. I liked what they did with Tamsin. I liked what they did with the young kids in the story. I liked it. I liked what she did there. I liked the idea of the thing that they think might be hunting them. It's just another certain ailment that comes along that I really just feel like you just really cheapened the whole thing, and it just kind of ruined the whole thing for me. Now, again, I'll say that the pacing was quick. It really was. And it's never to a point where you're like, this book's boring, I got to put it down. But I feel like it's a Liza Lockmore problem for me. The structure is all off. I'm really into this one character. I want to know what's happening. Now let's stop that momentum and talk about this letter that someone wrote 3 years before this expedition about a character I could care less about. A character that she's mentioned maybe once or twice. And it just completely kills the momentum. And by the time you get back to that character, you're like, oh yeah, forgot about that. I feel like, again, it's one of those things I feel like could have been fixed in the editing room, and you could have made the pacing much, much better. The found journals, to me, it just felt like it was trying to do like Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it really didn't work for me. I wasn't really crazy about the way that those were paced and inserted into the narrative there. But again, flashbacks to less interesting characters, just, it really, really killed the momentum anytime it had anything good. So again, even amount of good and bad here. So, am I going to have a reason why you should read it? Of course I've got a reason why you should read it. I think first, it's because it's a topic that I've said a couple times now. It was perfectly primed for this type of adaptation. It is something that has fascinated people for so long. Hey, let's add a little spin to it and be like, hey, there might be a supernatural element involved. That's a great idea. It really is. If you don't already know the real life history of this, like me, I feel like you might enjoy it. You probably really will, because it really is. It's something you have no idea what the Donner Party is outside of what I just told you. And you're just like, hey, this just sounds like a neat idea. I liked Oregon Trail, the game, as a kid. Let's make that into a horror story. You might actually enjoy her twists and turns on this. So it's a quick read. Her writing style is easily approachable. I don't have any problems with her writing style, her prose, or anything like that. But a couple of final thoughts here. If you can't tell, look, guys, I was very disappointed in this book. I was very hyped. This was one of my most interested topics in high school when we went through it, because I'm a sick individual. But I was always just fascinated by the story. So I was excited about this. I thought it was absolutely a wonderful idea, and she just did not stick the landing for me. So it was a perfect topic, and I just felt like she squandered it. She had a great opportunity to really do something special here, and she just completely changed everything that makes the actual event horrifying, to me at least. So that's just my opinion there. I wonder if I wasn't a history nut on this, maybe I would enjoy it a little more. But like I said, I really feel like if she had just done a straight dramatic retelling of just starting at like Forlorn Hope, that is where they first went out on their snow, what they called the snowshoe expedition, and that's where they had to try to find out if there was a way they could get over these mountains on foot. If it should have started right there, I feel like it could have been a really great, scary story in its own right, just going through the history, not adding these one big element to it that really, really brought down the whole cannibalism aspect. So yeah, it's a missed opportunity for me, and I'm going to be honest, I was so let down by it. It made me pull The Deep, that's her Titanic book, and made me pull that one off of my TBR. I don't feel like this one disappointed me so much. I don't feel like I'm going to give her another shot. So if that sounds harsh, that it is what it is. But as always, guys, with these things, I encourage you to read it on your own and make your own decision. This is just my opinion on it. I was greatly, greatly let down, and it was something I was super excited about. So, guys, it sounds weird that I'm going to tell you, hey, yeah, I didn't really care for this, but you should read it. And I know I don't do a ton of somewhat negative reviews on this channel, so it's probably surprising to some people. I think the reason is because I cover so many things that come so highly recommended to me that it seems like I'm just one of those reviewers who loves everything. I really am not. I like more than I dislike. I'm never going to be labeled as a hater or anything like that. And whenever you put the review goggles on, as I call them, you're going to find a little bit more wrong with some stories than other people might. With this, they're glaring. They were very glaring, and I think this is one of my least favorite books I've read this year, and it's just really heartbreaking to me because I was really, really excited for it. So, guys, have you read The Hunger? What did you think? Am I wrong? Drop in the comments and let me know, and I will talk to you there. Stay hungry.